Hello and welcome to the Horse Race Politics Podcast. My name is Dr. Lou Bromfield, postdoctoral researcher in politics at Swansea University's Department of Politics, Philosophy and International Relations. Joining me today, as always, is my co-host, a man that has been told he will always go far in life, just far away from here. It's Professor Matthew Wall. How are you today, buddy?
Shmai. I'm actually the co-director of the Wales Institute of Social and
Moving on
Economic
to
Research.
today's topics, we are going to be talking about many elections that have happened. It's been Election-Mania this week. It's been kind of crazy.
Although R.I.P. Hulkamania.
Rest in peace, Hulkamania. He died doing what he loved.
Shilling,
What?
selling his soul.
Shilling.
Shilling,
We had an
selling
Elvis
out.
situation going on.
The poor fella. Hulk Hogan became a major political figure.
He did, yeah.
But
He was there at the was it the Madison Square Garden rally that they had? Just ripping his vest off. That's a real vote winner in my mind.
Hulkamania was his original catchphrase, and now we can say things like Election-Mania.
Election-Mania. But it is Election-Mania because this week has been kind of balls to the wall crazy in terms of contests. Well, this week and last week, it kind of overlapped. And last week, we were preoccupied with Caerphilly, another by-election. So we will be talking a little bit more about some other by-elections. I've been looking into the US. You've been looking into Holland.
The Netherlands.
Netherlands. So I guess we can throw down a bit of context. Should we go for the Dutch first?
Yeah, okay. So
fill everybody in. What happened? Who won? Was it a routine election? Was it just a random general election, or was it a specially called one?
It was a snap election.
Snap. Oh my God. We've got a few of those in the UK.
And called on the back of a kind of breakthrough election for the Freedom Party, which I can't pronounce in Dutch, PVV. Geert Wilders, far right kind of, I think very similar to what Reform is for Nigel Farage. Okay. PVV is for Geert Wilders. So they'd broken through. They were the largest party. They formed part of a coalition about 2 years ago, I guess now. There was a year of coalition negotiations. There was about 6 months of dysfunctional government, and now we've had an election. So it wasn't a sort of regularized election. It was a snap election for the Dutch Parliament, which has the sort of sovereignty over the Netherlands fundamentally. So it was like a big national election. The kind of media narrative is that this is there are many media narratives around it. Fundamentally, the D66 is the kind of major victorious party, but only in a very Dutch sense. And I've kind of noted, what's the word? Kind of a clash in reportage, because it's like, D66 has won the Dutch election. You might expect them to form a government fairly soon. But the percentage of the vote was just under 17%, 17.
Jeez.
So we're in kind of Richard Tunnicliffe, Caerphilly territory here. And yet they're the largest party, right? So the Dutch electoral system. So unfortunately, we do have to keep coming back to electoral systems because they shape so much of the dynamics of the horse race. It's very proportional. And usually the party with the highest vote share, all it really gets is a bit of impetus in the kind of coalition phase, which is too complex to go into here. Is a matter of you'd have to study it for about a week to really understand it. The monarchy is involved. There's kind of it's all basically a set of ways to develop a coalition government when no party has a majority. So the kind of political implications are basically until Christmas, there's going to be a caretaker government in the Netherlands, and then we'll see what kind of coalition comes together in that time, and probably in the new year, but it might go on for longer. We could have
caretakers could be good. Roberto Di Matteo won the Champions League with Chelsea when he was the caretaker.
I lived in Belgium for a year, and there was no government basically. There was just a caretaker, and it was fine.
The coalition's frequent mode of governing in Holland.
Yeah, they're a de facto necessity because of the proportionality of the electoral system. So there is a how would I describe it? The amount that you kind of need formally, the proportion of the overall vote that you need formally to get a seat is less than 1%. It's 0.67, something like that.
6-7.
Yeah, 6-7.
6-7.
Is what my daughters have been teaching me. That's good.
We're hip.
This means that effectively, if you have more than 1% support in the population, you can get a seat in the Dutch parliament.
Nice.
And Dutch society and politics is very complex and kind of multi-dimensional. So you put those two things together, and you get 15 parties have achieved at least one seat in a 150-seat parliament, right? Yeah. So it's about as fragmented a political structure as you can imagine. And the kind of narrative has been D66, which is D66 is a difficult part. It kind of forms as part of the wider history of Dutch centrist progressive politics. But in a little bit like, I don't know, the Liberal Democrats, there's kind of splits that explain where a party comes from. So they're that kind of a party. Fundamentally, they're kind of centrist. They're very, I'd say, akin to the Liberal Democrats in terms of what they're about. They're not in the business of like revolutionary change in terms of society. They'd be kind of more progressive on societal kind of issues, and probably more permissive on immigration, which is this key cleavage that splits the Dutch party system. So the big winner is this young lad, Rob Jetten, 38 years old, leader of D66, and kind of, favourite to become the next prime minister, I'd say, given the kind of results. And his campaign was very reminiscent of Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. Indeed, kind of has a 3-word Dutch slogan that is pretty much "Yes, we can."
Yes, we can. Yeah,
it's a kind of a colloquialism, but and you know, the usual Barack Obama kind of rhetoric. Oh, there's more that unites us than divides us, and you know, this kind of shtick, I guess. I think Geert Wilders, the far right PVV leader, had a really bad campaign. Kind of missed a lot of campaign events. Actually, was kind of seen as being in a kind of a huff, like across the campaign, which is never great. But where it leaves us in the big picture of Dutch politics, actually really difficult, because if you we were talking earlier about kind of blocking parties in these complex political systems, there's not much actual shift, because a lot of the PVV seats have gone to basically an equivalent kind of right-wing party. So when it comes to forming up a coalition, there are options for sort of a centrist grand coalition, but they depend on the Liberal Party, what is the Liberal Party again? The VVD, I think, joining in, and they ran on a ticket of not joining in with the leftist parties. So the leftist parties, actually the Green Left and the Dutch Labour Party, kind of formed a common list, so they merged. But they kind of underperformed relative to what that might have been thought to achieve. And so you end up with this smorgasbord, basically, that's presented as like a massive overturning of Geert Wilders. Geert Wilders was literally thousands of votes away from being the largest party. It was only when the final set of vote tallies from like expatriates or emigre came back, and that kind of swung the count decisively for D66. So like a catastrophic loss and a stunning victory is only a matter of a few thousand votes here. So it can be tempting to kind of overread the dynamism of the election, the dynamic of it. But that's basically what's after happening in Holland. So I'd kind of, just to say, I'd kind of caution against this, like, oh, like the left is back, or like it's, you know, it's like positive politics is back. I don't know. There was a very specific set of circumstances that favoured this particular message in this context, but I don't see it as a big overturning of the kind of broad shape of Dutch public opinion.
No, like if in 2024 in the UK, if the vote had not been split so aggressively between the Tories and Reform, the message you take from that election is a very different one. And then there's one that's kind of impacted with time as to how, especially with how polling has showed how the UK has changed recently, with Labour winning so many seats, but winning them all with such small majorities means that it's so easy for them to just, you know, the only way is down from there. But I was reading about how Rob don't know, Jetten. I don't know. I can call him Rob because that's just easier. His party.
I think it's Jetten. Yeah.
I think let's just say it wasn't exactly like a pro-immigration narrative. Let's say it was more of a Labour 2024 kind of campaign of being tough on immigration as well. Like, but this was, I mean, I raised this with Rob when he was on, that there is kind of just this seemingly centrist or soft left shift towards, we have to kind of adopt the framing of the right in order to appease those voters and make it easier for them to kind of cross the aisle. And like when you're winning on a margin that's that small, it's almost kind of understandable that you would do that in a way. Like,
but there's one man who didn't do that. Zohran
Mamdani.
Shall we move on to it?
We can move on.
This is very exciting.
This is very exciting.
I'm sure, I know you've been kind of an early adopter with this politician. So.
I'd like to think I was an early adopter, but I think I could have been earlier. But to be honest, like he only kind of really appeared in the last year. So I'd say getting in like a few months ago counts as being an early adopter.
Certainly on this side of the Atlantic, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we have by-elections in the UK. In the US, they're called special elections, just to make them feel good about themselves. And this, now that I think about it off the top of my head, I can't even remember if this was a special election. If it was Eric Adams was in charge before, and he's probably the most wildly unpopular figure you could possibly imagine. But we had a series of elections, some of which were special elections, some of which were mandated. That was the point I was getting to. But arguably the most high profile was the mayoral race in New York. The three candidates for that were Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, who may or may not have been shot 5 times in the back of a yellow cab by the Gottis and Gambinos. He may have said that a couple of times. You had independent Andrew Cuomo, the man who has more sexual assault allegations than Democratic Party memberships. And I said allegations there, so I'm okay. And the eventual winner, the actual Democratic nominee, Zohran Mamdani, or Zohran Mamdani, is a state of mind to let Richard Tunnicliffe know that he needs to learn a lesson or two from using daddy in a bit of political messaging. But he is a democratic, socialist, young Muslim immigrant. And now he's mayor-elect of New York. And his kind of rise, like he was in the contest, a year ago, polling single digits, talking 1%, 2%, 3%, no name recognition whatsoever, and had just this stratospheric rise in the space of a year to the point where he is, some would argue, is kind of emerging as the new face of the Democratic Party. Whether you agree with that or not, whether you think he should be the face of the party.
Kamala wants another run, right? I think she's entitled to 2 runs at this.
Please
office.
no, I can't relive that campaign. But the fact that you bring up Harris is actually really good, because I think the principal lesson from Mamdani's campaign is that he, at least from my perspective, gave people something to vote for rather than something to vote against. Whereas if you look at Cuomo's campaign, so Cuomo was a Democratic candidate. He lost the primary race to Mamdani. And
he ran as an independent.
He's stripped of his status as a Democrat because of many allegations.
I've seen, because Republicans are kind of having a moral panic about Mamdani, a lot of criticism of Sliwa for taking votes off Cuomo.
Yes.
On the kind of more reactionary kind of war room type part of the MAGA movement.
Yes. However, if we do add their votes together, Mamdani still wins.
Mamdani overperformed the polling. That's the thing. Yeah.
So we've got almost 98% reporting. Turnout was almost 40%, which is, I think it's the highest it's been for decades.
Dutch, just to say, 78% turnout.
Wow.
Down, right?
Down. Yeah. Mamdani won. Is currently at 50.4% of the vote. Cuomo had 41.6 and Sliwa had 7.1. So that would have put Cuomo at 48.7, which would have meant that Mamdani still would have won by a couple of percentage
points. If you get
points.
over 50%, you win no matter what.
This is true.
This is called an absolute majority. This is how percentages work.
This is how they work. It's how numbers work, right? This is our resident quantitative expert.
So I'm going to tell you something now, guys. I trained for a long time. 50% plus 1 wins any election.
This is true.
That's on a for a single seat, yeah.
Well done, Mamdani,
So
and well
that's
done,
my
Matt, for
political
counting.
strategy. You can have that one for free. Yeah, more votes is always better, basically. Yeah,
This is true. This is true. But that sent me down a rabbit hole last night of looking into studies about whether increased turnout has a partisan boost, because it's like a conventional narrative that Democrats want higher turnout, Republicans want lower turnout. But I was reading a very detailed bivariate study that was just like, no, this is a load of bollocks. There is no partisan split. But
it's very, I think
in America,
consistent partisan split on turnout is, I think it depends on the context.
Yes, 100%. However, the New York race was not the only race that happened. However many nights ago that was. There were a few nights ago. So we had in New Jersey and Virginia, we had gubernatorial, which is the stupid word for governor race. Gubernatorial sounds like a weird word. And there were wins for Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, who had won with much larger margins than Harris did back in 2024 against Trump, or outperformed Harris in 2024. It was as the Guardian reports, it was the first time Democrats have won 3 consecutive gubernatorial elections in New Jersey since 1961. And there was also, I don't have it here, but there was another one in, I don't want to say Connecticut, but I don't think it's Connecticut. Anyway.
Well, there was Prop 50 in California that we're going to discuss as well. Yeah.
California, as we say. California, Gavin Newsom's California, as people might be inclined to say. We had Proposition 50, which was not an election for candidates. It was an election for a proposition. Surprise, surprise. Which would enable congressional redistricting that would heavily favor Democrats. It won by a massive amount, but it was principally spurred by renewed efforts from Republicans to do some redistricting of their own, which we might otherwise refer to as gerrymandering, where you are redrawing.
When you're redistricting with the purpose of partisan advantage is gerrymandering.
Yes, but when are you ever redistricting without a political?
Well, that's exactly why. Say in the UK here, we have a boundary commission. And these are great people. These are like the geekiest geographers. They're great people who really put a lot of thought into the geographic shaping of constituencies with a view to kind of not harming, with the view to having naturally occurring localities and let the chips fall where they may politically.
Yes.
To do that, you need a body that establishes the boundaries that's independent of the legislature whose members contest on those boundaries. In America, largely that's not the case.
Yeah.
In California, it was overturned by Prop 50. Such a system was overturned by Prop 50, and this was a sort of a temporary enabling of the legislature to gerrymander. I mean, that's the only way I can characterize it. And like, so it's something that I think is largely seen as like a sort of victory. So, from my great crack, I was going to talk about Gavin Newsom, I think is the name, right? Not Newscum. Newscum is a kind of a slur.
It is a slur.
And he's kind of driven this through. This is associated with him. This has had a big victory.
Yeah.
And yet to my maybe overly naive brain, this is like totally unacceptable bullshit like that he's after pulling out here. And it fits with a pattern of this like, oh, like we're even worse than the Republicans, like, you know what I mean? If they punch us in the face, we shoot them with a gun mentality. And so I profoundly sort of dislike it. But as you say, it was brought about really as a sort of response to redistricting in Texas.
Yes.
Which was like old-fashioned gerrymandering, wherein there's no public consultation, they just do it. Which was kind of a break from what's normal, because normally the gerrymandering takes place around the census. And Trump has kind of just introduced this mid-cycle gerrymandering season.
Yep.
All of which undermines the validity of the midterm elections, which kind of just shows, I suppose, that both sides are willing to rig the system. And, I think in the end, what the Democrats might have a sort of a Pyrrhic victory in this sense. They're pulling down the house that they actually want to move into. That's my take on it. And I just don't like Gavin Newsom. I think he's a bully, kind of nasty guy. So people like that I don't like. I can't. There is a personal element to someone like this that you see coming up, getting behind them or not. So Mamdani, to go back, has a very likable personality and kind of came through again and again in the campaign. Newsom is a different kind of character altogether, I think.
Yeah, I think he definitely floats around that kind of post Labour leadership contest Keir Starmer vibe of kind of like I used to like you. Now you seem to be catering to kind of a MAGA base for kind of no reason, especially when you're in California, as people may say derogatory, like the safest Democratic seat possible, and it feels the only angle that I see as being so appeasing in some cases of Republican voters is that you're gearing up for a presidential run. You're trying to lay the groundworks to say that, look, I can do compromise, I can stretch across the aisle.
But also I can be as kind of nasty, right? I can get down and dirty in these kind of political tactical battles. Like, we'll do this, like, and I think in that sense he seized a kind of favorite status. I must look at the betting markets for the Democratic nomination. Like Harris, I was literally using that as a joke, but she did say that she would think about running again, which I don't think that would happen or work. And I think and this connects up to the broader question of what these elections mean for American politics. So they're broadly seen as kind of positive for the Democrats, right?
Absolutely.
But they are positive for the Democrats through a kind of geographic strategy of like running totally different candidates in totally different localities. So Mamdani is not going to win in Virginia, right? Nor is the Virginia candidate going to play so well in New York. And they're very different, right? They have totally different outlooks on international relations, outlooks on domestic politics, outlooks on tax and spend, outlooks on civil rights, right? All of these things that make Mamdani sort of socialist and far left, and have made him, enabled him to win in New York and have a kind of a type of a message. None of those things apply to the other candidates who are kind of tailored for their constituencies, and yet like the Democrats need to unite a coalition to win the election. And Newsom seems to be a kind of rallying force because I think he has been the first high-profile politician to just really embrace MAGA tactics. But I do think I don't know. Politics is a battle, is a kind of a fight. But I think if you impugn the institutions of politics to win with them, you're kicking the ladder down that you've climbed up on in a way. But you're still on the bleeding ladder. Anyway.
True. So I say a couple of things about that. First of all, like it's a damning sign of the state of American politics that Mamdani would be considered far left. I think there would be many leftists who would tell you that Mamdani is nowhere near left enough, and just being able to
I'm sure he hears a lot of that. I'm sure when he's doing on the ground stuff with kind of leftist groups, he's being told, why aren't you going further?
But it's that kind of post-McCarthyism vibe of you can't really say communist, but that's the point, is that he is not a communist. He's a democratic socialist.
What's the New York Post front cover? Is literally just a mock-up of him holding a hammer and sickle. And it says like, what's it called? On your marks, MARX. Yeah.
It's crazy, but like that, it's still that general sentiment of you can't go anywhere near socialism or any kind of progressive leftist values without just being labeled a communist. Trump routinely refers to him as a communist. I don't even think Trump knows what a communist is.
A forward reply. It was something like, what is it? This just happened, or get ready for hell, or
it's like it has begun. He was a very like damning, like this is the end kind of.
New York has just declared war on the White House, basically. This is the president, right, tweeting this.
And he was saying that he would do things like stop federal funding to New York if Mamdani was to win, which is, I mean, if that's not election interference, I don't know what is, but.
So just to say, I think it is right to say, kind of squeamishness maybe people like me would have about something like Proposition 50 has to be put in the context of the actions of the incumbent, like and the targeting of a kind of Democrat strongholds and the kind of tactical advantage of winning the House of Representatives in the midterms as a kind of block on that. So I do see that picture, but I think the kind of original sin of the American Constitution is the electoral system for president is an absolute joke.
It is wild.
Not a joke when it was written, like, what, 200 odd years ago.
Yeah.
Hey, things have changed. You don't have to get a horse and carriage to bleed in Washington from Texas anymore.
Exactly.
We could just count up everyone's votes the same. One person, one vote. That's called democracy. It couldn't be easier in a presidential vote.
Yeah.
So you could even have a runoff system like France. That would be better.
Yep.
But the way that the fact that the districting is such as it is, for presidential elections and for House of Representatives, they're kind of the vagaries of first past the post open up all these distortion opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get around them. Like, but especially when you don't have what's the word? When you don't have a non-partisan process of like dividing up the country into constituencies, like, so it's the structural problem is within the Constitution, which is very difficult to change, and it would require all the people who benefit from the current system to turn it over, which is not likely to happen anytime soon.
No, especially when you're talking about like supermajority territory for any kind of reform in the Senate. You're talking about needing to persuade at least like half of the Republicans to vote against a system that does disproportionately benefit them because they typically possess the smaller states, which then require the extra voting power that the Electoral College brings. To go back to a couple of things that you mentioned, betting markets, Polymarket, who don't sponsor this show, but if they want to give us some money, we'll take it.
Take money from anyone.
Gavin Newsom is currently at 40% in terms of the next Democratic presidential nominee. AOC in second at 14%, and then Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris both at 5%. Just to give you a kind of a rundown.
So AOC represent, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yep.
She is a member of the House of Representatives, and I think she would be the kind of Mamdani left-wing national level politician.
From what I've gathered through my general following of American political commentary is that she might be gearing up for a Senate run, and I think she would be challenging Chuck Schumer if that were to happen. So that's very much a kind of
that's an easy target,
easy win. But it's very much that kind of rift within the Democratic Party of your more establishment figures, a lot of whom were incredibly hesitant to endorse Mamdani. They didn't really endorse anybody in the race for a long time. Really hesitant to get behind him, which is just, again, political strategy, if we want to go back to that. To go back to Prop 50, though, just to give a little bit more context on that, Democrats currently have 43 of California's 52 House seats. So, again, just to quote The Guardian, because I'm a woke leftist, the new maps are drawn to help Democrats flip as many as 5 of the 9 Republican-held seats in the state. It could also make several swing seats easier for Democrats to win. 5 seats could be decisive in the fight to take control of the House, a chamber likely to be decided by razor-thin margins. And
this is in the midterms now we're talking about.
This is just straight up in California. And obviously, the midterms then present a massive opportunity. Republicans currently have, according to the U.S. House of Representatives website, 219 seats compared to 213 for the Democrats. There are 3 current vacancies due to resignation and death. And so if they were to win those,
the usual
suspects. When your average age of your representatives is like 903, that typically happens.
Yeah.
If Democrats were to win those 3, which are in Tennessee, Arizona, and Texas, so highly unlikely they win all 3, they would still need 3 more. So then if they win those 5 extra seats due to redistricting through Prop 50, they would then have control of the House. Typically, the midterm elections are, as we say, usually when we're talking about by-elections or special elections, a chance to punch the incumbent in the face. And Trump losing control of the House of Representatives would be a big deal because they currently hold all of them.
Classic example, 2010 midterms after Obama's, like, what seemed at the time like a kind of generational shift. Lose the midterms, all of a sudden
you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And so that is it's not just this is a bit of a win for the Democrats. This could fundamentally shape American politics for the next 2 years, and massively thwart any kind of agenda that Trump's trying to do, even though he's been shown to sign more executive orders than any other president.
Yeah, well,
there's only so much you can do with executive orders.
I think in the normal rough and tumble of politics, that the kind of analysis sort of ends there, right? It's like, okay, so a kind of a thwarting counter-majority arises in the House of Representatives as a result of a kind of political stratagem. Die down, well played, you've stymied the president, and then we'll go again.
Yep.
But we're not in normal politics. So we have an incumbent who spent 4 years denying that the 2020 election result was valid, right? That the system was rigged, that the system was unfair. You have a lot of speculation about how the kind of integrity of the midterm elections, the integrity of the consequent elections in America, and I think electoral integrity hinges on the fairness of the electoral system. Now, that when you have a fundamentally unfair electoral system anyway, that's a bad place to start from. But making it more unfair, it just moves you, I think, another step in terms of, well, whoever wins or loses the election, like, we want to be in charge for both sides.
Yeah.
Ultimately, right? However many votes you get, I don't care. I just want to win the election.
Do you see this strategy, though, as being, at least from the Democratic point of view, as being fundamentally necessary, given the Republican efforts to do the same thing in Texas? I know you mentioned it, but like, there isn't I think if there was one way I could describe Harris's campaign, let's say it was very much a when they go low, we go high. It's we're trying to act as if we are some kind of superior party when you're not. Stuff like Prop 50 shows that you're willing to get into the trenches with them and fight. Like, should they not have done this? In your opinion, or is that more of a normative reflection just on gerrymandering entirely?
I don't think they should have done it.
Okay.
I think it was the wrong. I think they did it in a way where it's like, well, we've consulted with the public. That's better than Texas. There's a sunset clause on this special legislation, so we'll go back to the old system for the next census and so on. And the Republicans kind of made us do it. But I just think that gerrymandering is wrong at a kind of at the most basic level of, like, what is the reason why democracy is actually a good system morally? Is fundamental democratic equality is the answer of Robert Dahl is my favorite democratic theorist, which is like one person has the same as another person in terms of the weight of their vote. And when you have a system that fundamentally maximizes the likelihood of people's votes being wasted and cast aside and being subject to this kind of manipulation, that's violated. But when you start to kind of see the politicians kind of increasingly egregiously, like, violate, like, maximizing this kind of thing, it's like, well, whose side are you on? Is there a side for democracy here, or is there just a kind of brutal struggle for power? And the more you slide towards a brutal struggle for power, the more the other side is justified in escalating their response. And so we go until people start shooting each other, which is foreseeable in American politics. So I think the Democrats were right tactically and sort of wrong morally and strategically. That would be I think, it's very justifiable. It's very easy to justify, but I don't think it was the right thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like many things in life, right? People will advance, and as I said, I think, I think I sort of see in Newsom this sort of embrace of, a kind of a Trump style, a kind of a type of politics, that is always going to need to be like the biggest, best. It's all about humiliation and superiority, and in the end, I just don't like that kind of politics personally. So I have to acknowledge that's like a personal bias. Just to say one thing about Zohran, some seriously nice campaign art, the Bodega art stylings. Oh my gosh, that was very clever, right? And like, I think with, not unlike Obama 2008, you see a lot of innovation in these insurgent campaigns in America. And I think as a campaign analyst, I'm like, wow, this is it's kind of going back to an old style in a way, with a lot of like poster-like visuals. And it kind of it helps when your candidate goes to these televised debates and is just dropping absolute bomb after bomb and it gets clipped up and goes viral.
Yep.
It helps when your opponent is Cuomo as well.
Yeah, it really does help when your opponent is Cuomo. It's the other before we get into our great records, it's like there was an additionally important set of races were for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So Democrats retained several seats on there, which could be very important when we're talking about election interference, we're talking about election denial. Control of the Supreme Court would be utterly essential for the smooth conduct of elections, let's say. So
and I think that the reaction I've kind of encountered, like, so Democrats are kind of triumphant in this moment, right? Yes. And while they might be fielding questions about where does this leave them for the next presidential election, they'll say, well, we just had a good election night. Relative to expectations, which were already good, they did better.
They did better than expectations. Yeah, it was a fundamentally successful night for the Democrats, and it launched a tirade from President Trump, who was very, very angry. No surprise there. I do think that there should be a kind of bipartisan review of Mamdani's campaign, just as like something that parties can learn from.
Oh yeah,
he's a very authentic, genuine candidate, personable, just happy. But I think, as I said, kind of towards the start of this episode, I think for Democrats especially, the lesson really should be, from my personal view, is that you have to kind of lean into the kind of angle of hope, of optimism, of giving people something to vote for, of saying, what if we as a party just actually tried to make your life better, you know? And I think it might help to change the narrative around certain policies. Like childcare, I think, is a really good example of this, right? For every like dollar you invest into childcare, you gain back, I want to say several, $2 to $3 into the economy. Don't quote me on that, but it is for every dollar you put in, you get more back in the economy. The exact figure I don't have.
Yeah, this is the multiplier effect. This was basically a staple of Keynesian economics until that was just declared like a bad idea all of a sudden. But I think it is functional. Yeah. There's truth to that statement. Yeah,
it's about reframing kind of public goods or investment in public goods away from it being an expense and more towards it being an investment, right? If you have universal childcare, it becomes so much easier for parents to get back into work. If parents are back in work sooner, they're earning taxable income. That money is then coming straight back. You know, it's like with giving pay rises to public sector workers here in the UK. At the very least, it gets described
I think
a lot.
You really need to target the professor grade pay level.
That's not that high.
I've written a letter to Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer,
yes,
expressing this effect. But no, and I think. Okay, so I think that's the cost of living crisis, we call it in the UK.
They do call it that in the US.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that they called it cost of living as well, but they do.
Yeah, and the kind of day in, day out experience of being sort of somebody who was working a job and trying to kind of live a life getting harder and harder. Yep. There's a huge political, if you can actually help people to make that better, especially, you know, so targeting it in a campaign is one thing, and talking about it very authentically, consistently, doing something about it in the kind of constitutional strictures that actually face a mayor is maybe a different story. But I think we have to wait. We have to give the administration a chance. But I think if I'm kind of doing my consulting kind of idea for parties, I think increasingly a kind of a locally authentic candidate, like, which is a really old school idea, nearly like a 19th century idea, is back. And I think you have to have strong delegates that are authentic to their part of America, in states that you want to pull out the electorate. And you have to actually like lean into the fact that Mamdani might say some stuff that another Democrat won't agree with, but they'd say some stuff that he doesn't agree with. You need a kind of candidate who can be a kind of a big tent candidate to accommodate that.
We saw a lot of what you would call parachuting in the UK over the last couple of years, of where you have for the UK audience who know about Andy Burnham, this is kind of what would have to happen with him, in that he would have to go. It's where you take a candidate and you get them to run in a constituency that they're not necessarily from, or whatever, just because that's where they have the best chance of winning.
Because they want to go up the kind of national ladder.
Exactly.
Sudden, yeah.
I can't remember who it was, but there was a really, really cringeworthy interview with a Tory outside the House of Commons.
Holland, I think, is that the gentleman you're thinking?
Yeah, where he was parachuted in, and he was relentlessly grilled on this is a parachute, this is a parachute, this is a parachute, and it's horrendous. If you can find it, definitely look it up.
Parachuting is not unlike gerrymandering as a kind of practice. In that I think there are reasons to think that it's a bad thing, but it's done all the time.
Yes, but in terms of like as a strategy, it's probably a lot better if you have somebody who has authentic New York experiences to be somebody who's New York through and through. There's many questions that they threw to the candidates in debates and in kind of one-on-one interviews where it's like, where's your favorite place to go eat? Where's your favorite place to go do this?
What do you think of fares on the metro?
Exactly.
And I think like it's funny because some of the like earliest kind of ways that campaigning used to work were very much like so you'd have whistle stop tours where the candidate is going from city to city. What a good candidate would do is ask his city delegates, like, what do you want me to talk about? They'd kind of prep you. But back then it wasn't necessarily that City 2 could really follow so much of what you said in City 1. Does that make sense? Now, if you go to New York and say, I'm concerned about the genocide in the Middle East, you still have to, like, that's gone viral by the time you get to Virginia to talk about, I don't know, like how, businesses need investment or you need to privatize more healthcare, whatever you want to say over there. So it's kind of very difficult to have this kind of plural strategy without being accused of flip-flopping or sort of speaking out of two sides of your mouth. It used to be easier just to do that in politics. And it strikes me, I don't know, one way to think about it might be to, like, in the American presidential election is to have the delegates actually campaign as people rather than as placeholders in the thing.
People. That's Matt Wall's great advice.
Like there are delegates, there are people. They're not. It's not just a sort of accounting mech. There's actual people that are delegates that you vote in. But anyway,
let's transition to finish off today's episode with Matt's Wall of the Great Crack and the Sad Sack. My nomination for the Great Crack. Matt Wall.
Great Crack.
This guy's wall of crack and sacks. That's a whole different podcast. So we'll get back to that.
Yeah, that's our afternoon recording. Yeah,
that's on the Patreon. That's what you get today. My Great Crack nomination is the construction crews and the people behind gold signage at the White House who seem to be raking it in because they have been asked to construct a $300 bajillion ballroom while millions of Americans are being deprived of food stamps through the lack of the government shutdown has forced many people to go without governmental assistance, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, something like that, SNAP, food stamps. So while all that was going on, Trump was having a great Gatsby-themed party, so he seemed to be having a great time. But it means that millions of Americans are going without food, and the Republicans have been forced to kind of concede some ground on the SNAP program, and so they're going to fund half of it, which is, cutting everybody's food supply in half when you're relying on governmental assistance for food is probably still a bad thing. I'm just going to throw that one out there. But the guys who are in charge of making the ballroom, even though there's a government shutdown, the people who are putting gold signs up just today, I believe, Trump has put up a sign to the Oval Office in gold, but the images look like it's like 3 pieces of A4 paper with gold text on them. This was, I need to get the exact quote. Pennsylvania Congressman Malcolm Kenyatta said, A, this sign looks like shit, and B, 43 million Americans don't have access to SNAP and are weeks away from healthcare costs exploding even more. So I think that's a pretty good take for my great crack. That's a very sarcastic one. Just, most of my great cracks are very sarcastic.
Trump design projects are known for their elegance and
subtlety, nuance,
refinement, and
panache.
I'm sure in like 100 years' time, our future presidents will be dancing in the. It might be renamed the Epstein.
The Jeffrey Epstein ballroom. I think would be
for
pretty...
reasons of historical reconciliation.
There's a monument to Jeffrey's sins.
Yeah, I think nonetheless, I mean, yeah, if you're, just to say generally, if you're on the inside with Trump at all, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's open season for money for certain,
Pay for
if you're
play.
connected to
Allegedly.
Trump, allegedly, I mean, you can
All of
look
this
at
is alleged.
the returns that are being accrued, and you can also look at I think this is a really useful time to look at the comportment of the good and the great in American business and society, and how they will roll along.
Definition,
comportment, behavior of these people, and how when it comes down to it, they will just find a way to get money.
Yep.
And that's all they want.
Allegedly.
And the things they said they wouldn't do, they will do. So yeah, corruption is the winner.
Alleged corruption.
Yeah.
Covering all bases.
Corruption is an all-time like historical winner in most societies, but it's doing well now. It's on the up. Yeah, invest in corruption.
Who's your great crack?
Yeah, my great crack in the kind of tradition, I suppose, of the pod has to be Gavin Newsom, who's had like a hell of a week.
Is that a good week?
Yeah. I contemplated Zohran as well, but Newsom's sort of trajectory and so in terms of, I don't agree with what he did, but it's great for his career. Yes. And he's kind of he's crystallizing. I mean, you've mentioned in Polymarket, he's crystallizing a profile now, which no one else has done. I don't think AOC is going to be a kind of credible opponent to him.
I don't think she'll run. But come back to this in 2028 when I'm wrong yet again.
And the democratic sort of system has a long way of churning out people more or less like Newsom.
Yeah.
In like the sort of someone who's open to a bit of accommodation of business interests and so on. So he's had an amazing week here. He's kind of rode this wave, and he's starting to kind of emerge as the kind of face nationally of the Democratic Party.
Awesome. My sad sack brings us back over the Atlantic Ocean to us.
Oh, wonderful.
David Lammy is my nomination for the sad sack. He has had a terrible, terrible week. For those not in the know, we have had 2 incidents of... I shouldn't
laugh, but there's a kind of a comical element to how out of control the man found himself, like trying to deal with the situation. Yeah,
I need to get this exactly right because I don't want to say anything wrong. We've effectively had 2 prisoners here in the UK mistakenly released. So at the end of October, there was a 24-year-old Algerian man released from HMP Wandsworth. The police informed the Metropolitan Police they were released in error. Lammy was told about this. Then the Conservatives and everybody else found out. Lammy was asked in the House of Commons by Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge whether any more asylum seekers have been wrongly released since the high-profile case of an Epping sex offender last month. And then Lammy didn't say yes or no. He said, we've implemented the harshest, most severest checks. We're stepping everything up. And then Cartledge tells him in the House of Commons that a second prisoner has been released, very 9/11 style. A plane has hit the second tower kind of moment on national television. And Lammy did not respond, but he then eventually said that he was outraged and appalled. Basically, Lammy has become the face of...
I'd say he misses the Foreign Office. It was a lot like more,
going on holidays, having little chit chats
stuff,
around, and now he's the face of some releases. My other nomination for the sad sack would be ICE, and specifically, so they're going back over to the US. Masked, heavily armed federal immigration agents arrested a US citizen in the parking lot of an LA Home Depot store, then entered his car and drove away with his toddler in the back seat. So ICE kidnapped a toddler in the last 24 hours. So they would be my other nomination for the sad sack.
Yeah, okay. I had I thought about Hartfelder's, but we talked about his kind of lackluster campaign.
Yeah.
I think I'll have to have a chat about Rachel Reeves, just because whether she's a sad sack in the classic sense of like having kind of had a deflating political week, it does actually remain to be seen, because she's kind of tried to get out on the front foot regarding how the country has no money. And turns out we need money. Turns out they're charging us more money for interest now. As you might expect, whose fault is that?
That is the Conservative Party's
That's
fault.
the Liz Truss laid out
25 billion pound black hole. That
mini budget. Remember that?
That was very funny when in the space of like 3 weeks she just tanked the UK economy and quasi-Kwarteng. It was a team effort. It wasn't just Liz Truss.
It was an interesting time to be teaching like 150 first year's politics, and as you're like driving in, the whole scenario would change. So anyway,
she's a fighter, not a quitter, though. Remember
but that. Rachel Reeves in November in the rain, like we've had flooding here in Wales.
Yeah, I got very wet the other day.
Radio, just going on about like and it's a kind of a very, I would say, kind of establishment type old school British political strategy, which is like they call like rolling the pitch, which is a cricket metaphor as I understand it, which basically means like set expectations super low, and then actually maybe it's not quite so bad.
Yep.
But if don't just pull, and I understand that like she has to communicate to the kind of market so that this is kind of priced
so that they know it's going to be happening.
Yeah, there's a sort of re-establishment of British credibility, an attempt to lower the interest rates that we pay on state borrowing. But I think it's I think in terms of the Welsh political race that we're interested in, like nobody's coming to rescue Labour. Like you're looking there at a Westminster government which is like very much in that logic of we're going to hit our nadir in the midterm, right? They're chasing that nadir right now because, and to be fair, I think because they do think that they need to boost the tax base of the state, and how they do that and what's going to happen around that is open to question. But they've committed themselves. They committed themselves before the election not to increase taxes that basically account for like 75% of the tax take that they can control. And so, in rolling the ground for a bad budget, Reeves is also rolling the ground for like this kind of betrayal.
Yep.
That Rishi Sunak actually was, I think, quite right to point out what like their ideas weren't really achievable. And the kind of growth fairy was invoked, but that hasn't actually. The fairy is displeased. I would recommend a human sacrifice at this point.
Ooh, David Lammy at this point.
But given, Rachel Reeves isn't inclined to human sacrifice, but she has downbeat the mood of the nation, and so driving around in the grey Swansea November rain, all I'm listening to is people essentially giving out that they're going to have to pay more tax. And
I think
it's been that kind of week, isn't it?
There was a collection of people who had a lot of money that you could ask to pay a bit more tax, but
they're absolutely not. They're the
hard workers. They're the people that drive growth.
Don't want to. Well, the strivers, I think are likely to be paying a bit more income tax. I think striving is generally remunerated through like a wage. So it seems like that basic mechanism in society is going to be plundered by the government.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's something to look forward to anyway.
Fantastic. Well, what a shit show, eh? I can't really say anything more.
Zohran Mamdani is going to do a magic money tree, I reckon. You just plant a tree in the center of Manhattan and you can get money out of it.
But isn't it great? I was thinking about this last night as a final thought that like I was watching The Good Liars, a YouTube channel that I highly recommend. Very funny. And they were interviewing Mamdani, and it was just nice for him to just say, "Oh, there are billionaires here in the city, and I'm going to tax them more." Like that was it. It wasn't the those with the broadest shoulders should bear more of the burden, all these kind of arty-farty crap. It was just, hey, there are some people here who have absurd levels of wealth. They're going to pay a bit more. So that's my lesson to Rachel Reeves, but she will not listen to me.
I mean, Rachel Reeves ignores the structural reality of how income distribution has shifted in society over the last 20 years. I mean, I'm probably on the Mamdani side of that.
Mamdani.
That and Mamdani side. And as we said, Mamdaddy is a state of mind.
Mamdaddy is a state of mind. That's the lesson that we'll take away from all of this. Richard Tunnicliffe, if you're listening, you can't make a pun out of Tunnicliffe, but you can make a daddy out of Zohran. See you next week.